Welcome everyone. My name is Jeanne Stanitz. I'm a curator of contemporary art and architecture. I'm currently working at the Institute of the Principles of Modern Architecture, Design and Theory at the University of Stuttgart. Along my PhD, which is actually focusing on OMA's think tank AMO, I'm in charge of the collaboration we are discussing tonight. That is between our institute and the photography and film duo Hans Werlemann and Claudi Cornaz. And here I would like to briefly introduce today's conversation partners. With me is Stephan Trüby, Professor of Architecture and Cultural Theory, and he's the director of the Institute for the Principles of Modern Architecture at the University of Stuttgart, where I'm also working. Prior to this position, Stephan worked as a professor as Architecture and Cultural Theory at the Technical University of Munich from 2014 to 18. And he's a renowned architecture theoretician and a constant contributor to numerous architectural journals and magazines, with special emphasis on the art plus. However, important is to mention that on the 2014 Architectural Biennial, he acted as head of research of the exhibition part Elements, and that followed his interest in researching specific parts of buildings, in his case, the corridor itself. And this interest resulted actually in the very first collaboration between Hans Werlemann and him as part of the biennial project, whereby they created a photography series depicting the Welbeck Abbey with special focus on the notion of the corridor. Stephan Trüby is also the commissioner of this current research project with the creative team of Hans Werlemann and Claudi Cornaz, which we are very much hoping that will result in an exhibition project in the upcoming time. Hans Werlemann is mostly known for his collaboration with the Dutch Architecture Office OMA since the very beginnings, and many of these collaborations resulted in very iconic images that we will be discussing tonight. With a background in advertising and years of setting up darkrooms for photographic film developments, it was in '73 when Hans Werlemann as a photography company was founded. The starting kit, as I remember Hans, you told me, entailed a type of camera that was based on the one used for the first time to capture the moon, if I'm not mistaken. And since then, you also argued that you always stayed very true to the analog methods of creating photography. A crucial turning point happened in the '80s, and that's when he encountered the members of the artist collective Utopia. Through numerous performances, events, exhibitions, and publications produced, the group was a pivotal element of the Rotterdam cultural scene that we will be also discussing tonight. However, the initial encounter that led to this decade-long collaboration with Rem Koolhaas and OMA dates back to '79, and that was a moment that Hans, you earlier described as a moment that changed it all, right? So this intense collaboration with Rem Koolhaas and OMA invited you, Hans, to adapt to this new set of challenges that this new collaboration offered, that also influenced your way of thinking about how to act as a photographer. So this new endeavor was then titled Hectic Pictures. And the establishment of Hectic Pictures also signals the start of this vital collaboration between you and Claudi Cornaz, which has been ongoing for the last 40 years. Claudi has been, the person behind the camera and the responsible for all this still unknown, insane amount of footage of the OMA office life, model making, building site reality capturing, and the creation of numerous DIY tools we'll be also touching upon tonight. Their company became not only the official photographer for the OMA project, and this is something important to understand, but this creative hub that they created actually, their input was requested from model making through exhibition design to project development. So it was way more than this kind of traditional photography office versus architectural office, if you will. Concerning the nature of your work, one can say that experimentation is key, that you stand for 8mm, 16mm, and 35mm films, and intentionally blurry images, as you describe yourself, Hans, which defy the accuracy of high-resolution images, where you argued that there is nothing left for imagination anymore. Another important aspect to mention is that documentation for you, Hans and Claudi, have been starting from the construction processes of buildings already, and not necessarily just from the final state. onwards. So you have been there from the moment onwards the project started to get realized. And I think it is fair to say that what they built up is a very unusual relationship as a creative practice as part of the early OMA years, where you also actually had a dedicated space where you could work as part of the office in Rotterdam. So in order to demonstrate the diversity of your work, I would invite us to take a look at a series of images that perhaps paint the picture of tonight's conversation. As mentioned earlier, there's a very diverse nature to your work, and I just want to take these first few minutes to run through a few ideas that actually show us how many different angles you took and what were the backgrounds that were supporting your practice to develop throughout the years. And that's something, of course, advertising has been key, because that has been something in your background as well, Hans.
This was brought up by my father, of course, who was an advertising guy. And after this picture, we got a kind of break, because mild maakt vrienden is saying mild makes friends, of course. And I was in a kind of conflict with him, because I didn't think that by a cigarette that could be, you know, it was a kind of like, this is a picture of the break between my father and me. We had a long conversation of advertising in all time, and he complained. He claimed that advertising. I asked him, why is advertising important? It looks so smooth sometimes. Mostly it is too smooth. You know, why don't we do that? And after that, I became in the situation that we discussed advertising at itself. When I was working for the American Tobacco Company,
yeah,
this is Saatchi and Saatchi, for instance. My father and me tried to give it a rebirth, but it after 10 years after the war, it was kind of like sloping down. It was, you saw it everywhere. I mean, advertising was a kind of like, it came under pressure. And then I was not interested. I forgot interest at it. Not in my father, of course, but in his idea, but in the idea of advertising. And in the meantime, look, photography is like a bicycle. You know, you go with it, and you go with the flow. If you follow the camera, and if you are invited to do things with the camera, or by somebody else, or by myself as an autonomic person, I was brought up like self-made, you know. There was a kind of like type of realization in the pictures of positioned. You can see it a little bit. There was this like, photography is the bicycle where you went on in your life. That's what it is, and it's lens-related aperture, in fact.
Yeah, I
And
see.
yeah, and then the lens is still there, you know. And the lens has a kind of capacity. The capacity of the lens is het schijnend vermogen. The resolution, in fact, the ability to define. And the ability is, where do you use 65 million pixels and where 70? And in between, that came a kind of like idea about it. It's a technical thing, in fact. It has nothing to do with the impact itself.
Yeah.
And then I got involved in utopia, in architecture, in education, in a kind of like slow, silly way. And this triangle came to a kind of like energy which I can't stop until today.
Yeah.
It's incredible, the energy from the lens.
I mean, we will see on some of the upcoming works that I just selected as an overview that energy is really incorporating many diverse aspects of how to be a photographer, how to think about documentation. I wanted to also just highlight perhaps a few very iconic images that actually made important magazines covers as an input only that really are your works, Hans. And perhaps people know, perhaps they don't know, but they will know now. And that's why quite important.
You're very kind. Covers was also always one of my absolute specialities. Covers were, that's what I left over about the advertising. That was the cover. Reach the cover. Tack. And then also, look, ladies' magazines is maybe like 20, but magazines about building are far, 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 far more. I mean, they go with water pipelining and with all kinds of like details of
technical stuff.
The technical stuff of architecture, but so there are more, and it's also it is a nice environment to move in as a photographer in that kind of area. Do you understand?
Absolutely.
I mean, the architect is a kind of like technical architectural magazine, for instance. Most of these magazines are kind of like dully, and it's nice to travel via, for instance, the architecture of OMA, of MVDV, of other architects with a kind of like extra energy. It's nice to move as a picture maker into that world, you know, instead of advertising.
Pixel maker, that's an interesting way of describing
Pixel maker. Yeah.
I mean, another...
This is selfie.
Yes, a very unusual selfie, right? This is another aspect that for me was very interesting to highlight. Perhaps the very experimental nature of your work, whereby sometimes there is no definitive requirement for an image to be produced, but you just want to play around with tools, you just want to play around with ideas, and then see what happens. And a lot of these see what happens moments result in very iconic images as well. Some of these very interesting further like random moments of capture and experimental work of you figuring out as well how to capture moments perhaps. And then another interesting element is this kind of pop fashion era. Of course, very much connected to utopia as well, but this is also an asset to your practice that you have been interested in and exploring quite often with very important members of your very immediate surrounding, family and friends. And another thing that we'll be also discussing is really the nature of model making and how to stage these models in order to be able to capture the most iconic image, if you will, for the final take. However, this whole process of developing an idea with experimenting with lighting, experimenting with angles, experimenting with background has always been very key, and this is something that keeps you going. And it's not necessarily the rush that's interesting you, but the process itself. Another perhaps way of continuing early images were, for me, I collected a few images that were portraits, if you will, but then friends, families, utopia.
This is Floor Peters, he's filmmaker. And after I went to a graphic school for photography, I went to the Free Academy, and he was my partner. He was my partner in it. He was also a student, and he explained me for the first time, we discovered Andy Warhol. We were discovering all kinds of like cocaine, weed, NDSA.
Right.
In the meantime, I was in the military service. Nee, terug, nee, back to the back. Okay, this one. This one is made for Paris. In Paris, we designed, Rem designed the library, and he was interested in glass that wouldn't reflect. So we made two pictures of two pieces of glass of Rem reflected here in the studio before the black curtains. This is a Polaroid Slide, which is really important. A Polaroid Slide, 35mm Polaroid Slide, which you can develop instantaneously. The left image is not reflecting. Rem wanted to have non-reflected glass in the library of Paris. There is also another story about this picture that you see two sides of Rem's being, in fact.
And to be honest with you, I would just leave it here because this would have been just a quick overview of the diverse nature of your work. And I presume at this point we can actually get into more details, and perhaps this is a moment to continue with Utopia.
Thanks, Zsuzsanna. Utopia was mentioned already several times. That's the place I'm talking about. You mentioned already several times. It's a live-work community. I mentioned this already in a highly important building in Rotterdam. Also for the, if you allow me to say this, collective memory of people in Rotterdam and way beyond. It's a building from 1873. It's a place actually that was built in order to avoid that Rotterdam's residents drew their drinking water from the filthy canals and moats, which of course cause regular outbreaks of cholera.
Yeah.
And, the architect Van der Taak constructed this 48-meter tall tower, round water tower, and the exterior is decorated with a strange mix of Romanesque, Neo-Renaissance, and Moorish styles. And in 1978, this building got transformed into a live-work community, and it became the place of Utopia. So here we see some images then and more or less now. Here we see some historical drawings, and it's in 1978 this building became obviously draw some attention also way beyond the Netherlands for its exemplary reuse with a spatial quality unknown in dwelling types like these here. I just wanted to mention that some of the former, for example, filter tanks got transformed. For example, in the filter houses got transformed into residential units for 1 to 2 persons. And then Utopia, this live-work community, started to exist. In 1978, Utopia became also the place for many important cultural events, concerts of New Order, Nina Simone, and many, many others. But it also became, from 1983 onwards, I think the home of O10 Publishers, one of the most important publishing houses dedicated to architecture and design in the Netherlands, and which became also more or less the publishing house for the golden years, if you allow me to say this, of Dutch architecture. Utopia is also, I mentioned this already, the place where you, Hans and Claudi, live, and I think you prepared some pictures, a sequence of photos that you would like to share with us. And I'm sure that we will talk about Rancolas and the foundation of OMA and the relationship of the office of OMA and Utopia in a second. Let's keep in mind that both in 1978, Utopia got founded and Delirious New York got published. And we will see now in your sequence that you prepared, Hans, how the two stories somehow come together.
This is the area where we landed, in fact, in 75, 6. It was abandoned, it was lost control, nobody was there. In the beginning here, in the beginning, at the left down was a kind of like gate and we could get in. And that's the area where we started. Just from the other side later on, when there's a lot of buildings, in this is not totally empty. Yeah, totally empty. And as I explained, that Rotterdam was kind of trying to do something with this space, and while to develop and to discover this whole area, we where this was the machinery that was implanted in the studios that we are using now. These were the people that working there. I mean, and we explained later to this is a picture, beautiful picture of 1905. It's an amazing picture, as if it was taken yesterday. It always kept me busy, you know. After the cholera, we needed fresh water, and we worked hard on it to do it. It took us about 20 years I mean, in 1864 already were the first ideas to clean the water in Rotterdam. And now, at 20 years later, 30 years later, we finally succeeded in doing it by getting, by getting water out of these basins and out of the bigger basin near the river. So we try to clean the water, and we need pumps, of course. These were the pumps they're driving there. The funny thing is that today this is our studio. We have 2 machines of this on the area here on the field, on the factory. We have 2 of these machines running then at that time. And my idea is about it, that when these machines are spinning their energy for 40 years, they were demolished for the war. They went to Germany as metal. Then the energy is still hanging here, in fact. Can you imagine? And then this picture is going about the middle guy in first place. He is a very high member of the council, and he's city council, and he's going about finances of Rotterdam and art. Left is Reinoud, he's already dead. Right is Hans Oldewares, and he founded 010 Publishers. Jan Riesekamp is a very amazing guy. He knew that the city should develop new plans for this whole area. He liked that we were there, you know, that we wanted to discover the quality of the buildings with different types of friends. And we got in a kind of like film scene that only Fassbinder can follow in a way. We started just to discover all the buildings, and we started to make sound in it. And we tried to live there. There was no water, no electricity, no heating, nothing. And when I wake up in the morning in winter, my whole sheet was covered with ice. This is the fun we had, the Banana Sister punk band. And then we started to build. We were connected in a way to Rotterdam anyway, because of this Jan Riesekamp. He invited all kinds of people which were connected to the city to develop all kinds of strange exhibitions, works. It was a very rich time. Every day there was work to do and there was money to spend. This is Utopia later on in a kind of developing meeting. Sometimes we have 20 meetings in a year and sometimes none. It doesn't matter. I mean, when we need to talk, we talk. When we don't need to talk, we don't talk. That's really important. Don't talk more than with 7 people, take 3 decisions in 3/4 of an hour. Parties, film sets, political. No, it's not political. This is about music, of course.
Nee, Brinkman was here.
Brinkman was here. He was a minister of developing the south of Holland and kind of like blah 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 culture. And they were our guests. By the way, the red box in the end is my dark room. And then we met this guy out of the blue. I met Rem for the first time in my life at night. He focused on a kind of like control. And he was really like into let's focus on the things we do. It was not that he meant to be that. By looking at him, we realized that in a way. It was his way of working that inspired, not his words directly. When he was directly talking, then you get to imagine all these guys are architects, which are standing here. Claudi and me are behind. And the power of it, 4 or 5 times a day. Why is nobody was somewhere counting in the office. And then everybody sneaked together because he found a kind of like silly, stupid piece of paper. Back to reality, back to eenvoud, to simplicity. Now, it was not simple at all where we got involved in. The simplicity of a piece of paper somewhere in the office was like kind of like
yeah, that's me. The way I filmed this is the helmet I made. I always filmed with helmets, and this is the latest helmet I made. And I was on roller skates filming with this. My camera was hanging on one side, it's not on the picture. And on the other side was a video transmitter, so you could receive what I was filming just on your television sets. And I was skating around, also in the office, which we'll see later.
It's the first GoPro, Claudi. Huh?
Yeah, and I had a helmet previously, another one that was with 8mm, but this is for video. Started the first one in the 60s, 70s, way before any camera helmet existed. And I just wanted to film the way you're looking, the most natural way. And one of the important things I discovered is, because this is so strange looking, I had also a lamp on it and lightning and microphone. And it was so weird, you could talk with people and they wouldn't believe that I was filming. It was outside of their fantasy. And that was the really important one with these kinds of inventions. If you do something which is outside of the fantasy of other people, then it becomes natural again. And that was really important.
We were invited by the government, we were invited to make there was Ypenburg, it was a kind of like a flying, there was an old airport, Ypenburg.
It was a military airport.
A military airport, there's nobody there. And so there need to be housing. And they asked photographers, especially photographers, to have an idea about it, besides architects. And so we designed to discover the area with a balloon filled with helium and put a camera on it. And the camera was just filming and taking pictures of the area.
Of course, there were no drones or...
There were no drones, just the first drone, our drone.
We were always using, developing technologies which later on became normal. But yeah, we were inventing it beforehand, way before.
Then we got involved in
computers.
In computers and in digital aperture and in pixels. And that had a kind of like change. It has also possibilities. Tell Claudi, what is this?
Right, this is a little machine I made. It was for the maquette, it was for the exhibition in IFA in Paris. And it was for the ZKM building Rem designed. And Rem wanted to project on the facade of the building, which was 80 by 40 meters. And he was telling us, and Hans, and well, we started a bit to laugh, because how do you going to project on a facade of 80 by 40 meters? And well, you can do it, of course, you can make a film once, 35 millimeters, you can project it, but it's cost a lot of money, and they won't make another film within a month or a year. And Rem told us to start thinking about it, and we started thinking about it. And one of the important things I thought was we need a system so that the content is very accessible. it's very easy to create content for it. And certainly for the Centrum for Kunst and Media, well, I thought it was really important.
Obvious. Yeah.
It's obvious that you need something with which you can experiment. So this was a system I designed with a small laser, which would white on the facade, but it's very low power. But there were pixels on the facade.
Claudi, you mentioned already, and now the Office for Metropolitan Architecture and your efforts to document somehow also their way of working. We would like to share with you now a documentary film that I think hasn't been shown yet.
Yes, go.
Maybe you can also share with us some names, etc. Obviously, we see here Cornaz in a very busy scene at the former office at the Bompius, I think.
He was going somewhere, so he needed a ticket. So his personal assistant was giving the tickets, and he was losing them again and getting them again and talking where it's
probably in his bag is cassettes with slides.
Yeah,
because he's preparing a kind of like a presentation. On the table is the maquette from Den Haag.
Yeah.
So he's busy with high-tech other guys. Jeroen Thomas at the left here with the beard. I don't know her anymore. I mean, that's Jan Neutelings left. The guy. And I don't know this guy, but he looks a bit, yeah. Maybe he's a driver, I don't know. Rem is always. I was once the driver of Rem a few times ago, and we always panics in the car. I couldn't drive with him. My cars were far too slow for him.
You moved with your roller skates from
Yeah.
On the roller skates, we were working there and filming maquettes and things. And in between, I put on my roller skates and my helmet. And
from turbulence to concentration. Maybe you can share with us a few stories about these two poles. Obviously, in every architecture office, but I could imagine at OMA, this polarity is especially strong with this polarity of turbulence and concentration and silence.
In a way, it was incredible.
That's Kees Christiansen. Yeah. Left is Kees Christiansen, with also a pencil behind his ear. And he's going into the elevator, down to the car to
talk with Rem, because till the last minute it was always really hectic. But there were also very slow moments where there was plenty of time.
Why did you document this actually?
This was so. The energy and what was happening, the atmosphere was so fantastic. It was so incredible. So I thought, this needs to be filmed just to preserve it.
Here we see Mark Guyer, I think.
Mark Guyer.
Yeah.
So you knew somehow that it's a historical moment that should be documented?
We were working there anyway, so he was traveling around when I was busy with something else, you know. We took the context. I mean, the context was a kind of alive, you know. Look at it.
And here you see also the nice part, I mean, with the helmet, with all those bells and whistles on it, but people reacted in a normal way. They were intrigued, but yeah.
I mean, there was this like really busy day. Then there was a kind of like moment that Rem was gone. He was running or swimming somewhere. I never know. I never saw him eating very much. Then he came back in the evening and we were like eating a bit, pizzas or anything else. And then at 11:30, he asked us something to do or to get rid of out of his mind. Then he went home and we started work. So the next morning when he came back, it was there. It was a great moment, you know, when he came in the morning and we showed him something like that totally Then we had to take pictures of it. Then we had to develop it. Then we had to select the slides. Then we had to frame them. Then we had to put them in a carousel. Then it went in this box, in his backpack, and then he went off and said, "Then can you bring me to the airfield?" So we left him on the airfield, and then I went home and well done, you know.
We should still stay with this topic of the tools that you use and the solutions, technical also solutions you always came up with. We see here some videos of an installation. Maybe you could comment what we see here.
Yeah, here you see the test we made to project on the model.
We tried to project on the model.
Yeah.
With
that machinery with turning in the laser.
This one.
Maybe you could explain what is this machine about?
Well, this machine is about turning mirrors, actually. In the front here, there's a wheel spinning with a lot of facets, spinning quite fast, which will give the horizontal deflection. And behind it, there's a bigger wheel with bigger facets, which will do the vertical deflection. Here you see we blow smoke, you can see the laser beam.
It's not the machine that is smoking, but
no,
one of you.
We blow smoke there so you can see the laser beam, okay, in a way. Now it's turning and you see the reflections. But in that way, the laser could scan the whole area, the whole facade of the building, of the model.
Who is that?
Heiko.
Heiko?
Heiko.
Oh yeah.
In a preparatory conversation, you talked about 2,000 plus tools that you offer, basically, that you can use or could use.
Yeah.
Can you give us an impression what kind of
yes.
you're using?
This is a very early contraption I made. This is some electronics I made to get an 8mm projector and a tape recorder synchronized. And this is really before any computers. This is the basic building blocks of logic. And well, I never made a schematic of it. I just built it like that out of my head.
I'm really impressed about all these inventions and your ability to to solve all these problems and turn them into really obviously poetic objects. Thank you very much for this little tour through your Wunderkammer. We talk about 2,000 plus tools that you use, and one of these tools could be also called narration, stories. I would like to talk with you about your involvement with Villa Dall'Ava in Paris, this famous house for Dominique Boudet that got constructed between 1984 and 1991. You produced a film actually right after the completion of that is more or less unknown. There are many rumors about this film. I would like to talk with you about some of the elements of the film.
Well, it's simple. We were involved in this project of REM in building the villa. And in a way, I felt it was really important, that it's in a way it's connected to Mies van der Rohe's Barcelona Pavilion, you know. It's a kind of like new answer on that. Johnny Rotten would say, it's a new answer. The answer on that is that it's okay when we build it now, but how could it be? How it will exist after our death, you know? And what would happen with it? I mean, on one hand, there is this perfect balance in between spirits and of Rem and Boudet, the de opdrachtgever, the Auftraggeber, so to say, which is in itself a beautiful story. The friendship in between these guys who never met. I wrote about 13 like situations where different things are happening. And in this week, we try to take pictures of it.
Share with you a couple of slides that you produced, Hans, during this week, obviously. Obviously, here we see Jean Nouvel. How did he come into the game?
Well, Jeanne Nouvel is a kind of like the zeitgeist where Jean and Rem react on was amazing, you know, it was a kind of like kiss, so to say. They were equals in a kind of like fight of beauty and ethics and in technique and in all kinds of energy, you know. And I met Jean on the office for the first time when he was sleeping on the desk. But we invited him anyway to come to the villa and to give his opinion about it, you know, simple. Here is he sleep. Well, this is the first time I met Jeanne Nouvel in Rotterdam when I was working at night, and he came in and he asked for Rem, but Rem was not there. So he fell asleep on my table while I was working on a model or with slides or I don't know anywhere. You know, it was so beautiful. So that's why I met him. And so he came to the house and he spent hours and hours to look at the house and to drink and to spend pictures with us. And he was like, he was himself, you know. It was great to have him in the house.
This is
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. It has this like, what was like weer, a shield and then a rope?
A leash.
A leash. It had a leash, but I took it away in Photoshop. The giraffe had to be under control of a doctor. This is a young giraffe, a young architect giraffe, which could go through the piles. A normal giraffe would hit her head. She's from a circus, so she was a kind of like learning. This was a learning project for her. Next. This is the kitchen. Oh, wait, no. The kitchen. Did you ever see the more simple kitchen in your life?
Very simplistic.
I mean, even a caravan has more. And out of this kitchen came great dinners, unbelievable. It's just a joy of it. This is the best picture. I like this picture the best. This is for me the picture which is kind of like questions. The questions in this picture are so amazing. Imagine to live in this house, you know, to have it on your body as a smooth suit.
Okay, I think this is the last image. I would suggest that we have a look now at the film. The architecture theorist Bart Lootsma once wrote about this film, which became really also a myth in the architecture community, and developed some hypotheses or theories about it. And I would like to ask you if they are true or if they come close to reality. Bart Lootsma said that that this art project with this scenario which integrates the story of the pool, Jean Nouvel, a real giraffe greeting a postman, etc., a Black Panther, which didn't show up in the end for security reasons, was probably an homage to Anton Koolhaas, the father of Rem Koolhaas, who was also a famous writer who wrote stories featuring animals. Is that true?
Of course. Yeah, but I fight against the idea in a way, but it's true. There's another strange story about a giraffe, in fact. There's a very famous Dutch writer, I come on his name, he's Frans Kellendonk. He's called Frans Kellendonk. There was a moment that Frans Kellendonk wrote this booklet about bringing animals from Africa to Paris. They had no idea of a zoo. They only wanted to import animals. So there came a caravan of elephants, monkeys, giraffes, all kinds of animals from Africa, were antelopes, lions, panthers, everything, different monkeys. All these animals were transported from Africa, walking by ship, walking again through Spain to Paris. This whole voyage took half a year. When they were collected, then all these animals had to, the people in Paris had to store them in different places. And the strange thing is that I read, and then that was just after we published in The Architect this series, that it meant to be that the monkeys were stored in the forest in a cage, but the giraffes were located in Saint-Cloud. And Saint-Cloud is exactly where the villa is.
But Lootsma also mentions that in the year when you produced this film, in 1992, I think, right before Anton Koolhaas actually passed away.
Yeah.
And he also wrote, Bart Lootsma, that Rem never wanted the photographs or the film to be used again.
I don't know. That's in between Rem and his father, I'm afraid. Nah, I don't believe it. The film was not presented because we never took the opportunity in it. The problem is, I recognize it now, that what happened was that the story about the giraffe got more important as the villa. And that's, that's...
I would like to hand over now to Jeanne Stanitz.
When I arrived to your office, I was expecting an overwhelm of photographs and videos, and that's not what I got. What I've got was more than a day introduction to your work and your work ethic through actually the publications that you have been involved with, and understanding how important the medium of publications became throughout your career and for what reason, and of course for what kind of collaborations it enabled you to do. That was something that really stood out to me. So perhaps we can start prior to the Kader book, right?
Yeah, true. The Kader book came out of this book.
Exactly.
Yeah. It is it's 31 January 1980. Yeah, this is the Kader book design. We were invited by Jeroen Riesekamp and Molenaar, who was the head director of the harbor. That's the most powerful man we have. Not the mayor or the city, but the harbor is in charge of Rotterdam, of course. After the war, there were people working in the harbor, but the question that Molenaar gave us was that the distance between the city and the harbor is extending. It's greater. It gets greater and greater. They don't understand it and each other not anymore. Simply because there are no workers now anymore. It's all automized. You know, it's all automatic made. You have Rotterdam with the people in it and the harbor, and that's it. I mean, this harbor is a kind of like automat with containers. That's it. The people that work there are gone. So there's no reality more in between the Rotterdam South, for instance, where before and in the war and just after the war, a lot of harbor workers were working there and living there. They were all gone, you know, they already had no work. So there was a kind of a distance. And they asked, and then Jan Riesekamp, the same Jan Riesekamp, talked with Molenaar and they said, can we ask not these idiots which are living in Rotterdam, these artists, to make kind of like projects? And so we got 3 weeks to work on projects that we could restore the element of in between the city and the harbor, and the Kaderboek is one of these things.
Then continue with multiple collaborations with significant partners with whom you have been working on multiple projects eventually, like the Leben in the Stadt. Yeah,
this is the first picture I found. I bought this picture from NASA. We bought it from NASA because this is one of the first satellite pictures. Mm-hmm. It's a real satellite picture bought by the city of Rotterdam, of NASA. This is how it looked like. This is Accelerating Rotterdam, yeah. This is Bilbao.
What was the aim behind this Accelerating
Rotterdam? This was we visited about 25 other, no, not 25, maybe 22, I don't know anymore. Other cities in Europe which were accelerating, you know, which were like, had all kinds of city plans which were like filled you with hope and power, you know, that we were looking for the power of Europe. Yeah. Accelerating Rotterdam was in that time, you know, it's the context of Accelerating Rotterdam. And yeah, BVR, yeah, this is the most exciting landscape that we need to have now. This is what we are going to need. Yeah. This is the and there's a small part in Drenthe where it is where in fact the trees are fainting and the farmers are clever enough to make new trees. You see it. Yeah. This is the future of Holland. This will be the future of Holland.
It should be.
Charette is Rem developed this book, yeah. You know, in its form. Charette was a kind of like, for the MoMA, was a kind of like idea of design. And the jury asked only a box of drawings and ideas. Just a box for shoes. That's it. And Rem didn't want to make a box of ideas. He made Charette. Mm-hmm. And it's a like rough, like black and white, only black and white paper thing, but on the right order, so that nobody else could change. That's important. That's really
nobody
important.
Else could edit it.
So anymore. you couldn't edit it because when you change pages, you know, when you make a booklet, that's really horrifying. You know, then the idea is to change. Yeah. And when Riek Bakker asked me to make this like silly book of Midden-Limburg, I showed her a few books to make. And then she said, oh, I like that. Black and white's okay, we don't need money. And it's big and we can print it and we have money enough to do it. So, yes.
One of the last moments where I would like to actually now talk about is this very pivotal collaboration where Stephan would like to take over, because that's where your collaboration started, and that's the project that I'm thankful to, because otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here and I wouldn't be having this lovely conversation and learning about your practice. So of course, the Werlemann Abbey, a collaboration that you
Great.
did with Stephan. So perhaps we could continue with it.
Yeah, that's the cover of this little booklet, which also resulted in a spatial installation at the Central Pavilion. And the main topic of this installation was the story of the 5th Duke of Portland, who lived in the second half of the 19th century on a huge estate, Welbeck Abbey, which that's an aerial photograph of Welbeck Abbey, which is still in private hands of the heirs of the 5th Duke today. And the interesting thing about Welbeck Abbey is that the 5th Duke of Portland started to construct in the 1860s a huge underground network of corridors and tunnels in order to avoid that the 5th Duke would have to meet other people. James Westcott, Claudi, Cornaz, and Hans Werlemann and I went there, and we felt for the first time we're able to really document this underground network extensively. And the outcome were photographs like this by Hans Werlemann, and also a spatial installation where some of the photographs by Hans were exhibited, but also Claudi Cornaz produced a film, a kind of David Lynch film of this underground network. Yeah, that's how we met.
It was so amazing to be there, and also the how do you call it, the conservator,
Oh yeah,
because we came there and he started telling about the history, and I had my iPad with me, and I switched it on to record his story, and that's the sound of the film. And later on, he took us on a tour, and I took my iPad with us. So we have the whole story, but the story that he was telling, that was really amazing.
It's probably impossible to draw any conclusion, but I think it became really clear, also in the conversation, that the topic of expansion is in the foreground of your work throughout the last decades. And I'm really looking forward to put this on center stage hopefully in the near future after Corona.
We hope so as well.
we hope so as well. Great.
Certainly.
Thank you very much, Stephan.
Thank you very much, Hans. Thank you very much, Claudi.
Stephan, Zsuzsanna.
Okay.
Of course,
Zsuzsanna.
thank you very much for your time and your patience and sharing all this amazing material.
I hope you